Warning: this podcast features adult subject matter, adult language, and things not meant for children to hear. Viewer discretion is advised. You've been warned. And I believe, I think, it looks like we are, holy shit, we are live, ladies and gentlemen, here on the I'm No Joe YouTube channel. Thank you for tuning in to the latest episode here of the I'm No Joe podcast, where every armchair quarterback can feel like an Eddie Bravo. Thank you for tuning in under these craziest of circumstances, in these backstreets of boys reunions we deal with. Regardless, we are here for you fine folks. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Before we jump into the shenanigans, I want to take a moment here and thank these fine gentlemen for coming along and getting into the shenaniganry with me. First and foremost, the freshest guest a gentleman could ask for, Mr. Fresh03 himself. How are you doing, sir?
What's happening, man? Yeah, I'm getting the itch, man. I'm getting the itch. We need something. We need
Yeah,
something, man.
I know. We're getting there. We're getting there. Allegedly, we're getting there. We're getting there.
All right.
Oh, and across the
You holding?
octagon,
You holding, man? You
I'm.
holding?
Oh, but across the octagon, as it were, more often than not, my Wednesday night compatriot as well, my combat shit talking homeboy, my brother from another mother, the one and only Golf T Vapes himself. How you doing, sir?
Fucking excellent, except for there's still no fights this weekend.
I know, and thus the name of the episode. We got promised Mortal Kombat. We got promised Apex fights, and what we got was fucking nothing. Oh, we got honey dicked by Dana, folks. It happened. Before we get any further into it, we got honey dicked by Dana. We were originally the original plan, as everyone I'm sure was as excited as we were, was that this episode, god damn it, was going to be the setup and the breakdown for UFC 249. And god damn it, if Gavin Newsom didn't decide that fun was out of the question this weekend, and he and Mickey Mouse decided that they were going to gang rape old Dana White, Indiana Jones style. They crystal skulled him, ladies and gentlemen. They crystal skulled him. We had such a good thing going.
Yeah, it was a tremendous card.
It
Tremendous card.
it I will give it this. Even though it was a tremendous card, and it absolutely was, we did kind of have a few fallouts along the way. We lost the Khabib Tony fight. We ended up with Tony and Gaethje. We lost Rose and Jessica to the rematch. No substitution has been made on that one that we have been notified of. But jumping right along to it here. The good news of that is, they have prospectively announced, if all goes well, the next date they are trying to put an event on for the UFC, whatever they're going to call it now, because it's kind of just become this snowball amalgamation of all the events that have gotten postponed up until now, kind of just sprinkling whatever they can as they tumble through the postponement. They are prospectively calling May 9th the date, the next event, whatever it ends up being, 249, the UFC Super Show, whatever the fuck they're going to call it. As of right now, we do not have a location. It is still TBD. Dana has said that he is eyeing, ideally, if possible, to have it at the UFC Apex, which is built across the property, I guess you would say, from the UFC Performance Institute. They originally built the Apex Center to do all of the Dana White Contender Series fights, from housing, fighting, publishing. Everything's there to be shot on site independently. So they could prospectively do full events there. Quarantined, isolated, minimal staff, that's an option. If, and this is a monumentally huge if, Nevada removes their stay-at-home order and restrictions on sizes of persons gathering by May 9th. That actually brings us into one of the things that I wanted to talk about here. With this prospective May 9th date looming, there is an interesting thing that has started to happen. I'm not going to 100% say that it's because the UFC has been so public and so vocal about wanting to not only be first, but to be out there as soon as fucking humanly possible to start putting events back on. But in light of 249 getting canceled so fucking publicly, the world found out about UFC 249 getting canceled because of how it shook loose. We now have an odd situation where we have Florida, Nevada, and California, all three putting in proposals now to determine fight sports affiliates. And that is a giant, vague, inclusive term that covers fighters, cornermen, referees, cutmen, in-house doctors for backstage physicians, the whole kit and caboodle as far as fighting and wrestling goes. All three of those states are prospectively putting all of those personnel in that vague of a term on their essential personnel list. So even if for some reason the stay at home and shelter in place orders are not lifted in those three states, as long as they can get the minimum number of people allowed in a group gathering raised to at least 10, ideally 25 to 50, they can still do these without crowds at the Apex. They can still do these without crowds at the Tachi Palace. They can still do these without crowds in one of several different places in Florida as well. So now we have three states who are openly talking about adding all of the personnel required, whether the state's restrictions get lifted or not, to the essential list. I'm using air quotes for those of you listening. So the bad part is we lost UFC 249. The good part, if there is one in this weird of a situation that we're in, is that it's definitely made them a little more conscious and a little more careful about how they're planning things going forward like this. They're definitely not tipping their hand completely out like they were. But now we're in this weird situation where we've got states adding these personnel to the essentials lists so we can try and get fights moved on. And while I, for one, am absolutely chomping at the bit and scratching my neck like a fiend along with everyone else wanting some kind of fights to happen, I'm also at the same time willing to wait a little longer if it means the safety of everyone involved. I do understand that that is the greater good here. As much as it pains me as a fan to have to wait, if it means everyone's safe in the long run, I think we can all wait a little bit longer, but it does suck. I get it.
So there has been the sports combat sports entertainment side of the house has already been added to these exceptions. The WWE is running live shows, which means AEW is also going to be able to do live shows because you can't do one without the other.
Right.
And there is a plan, and there is a model in place for getting these events back on the air. Because WWE can do all of their live shows, they can do all of their pay-per-views, and they do have to be in closed locations. The number of personnel
Right. Still limited.
in places is limited, but there is a model in place, and so it's certainly doable. And it has been allowed by the state of Florida. So that's where WWE is running all their filming out of, is Florida, which a nice piece of happenstance. Like 90% of the wrestlers happen to live in Florida. So, um, but there is a model in place for if they want to follow this to get their programs back on the air, start being able to push events. It is closed set, so obviously it's not the same as having a live crowd there, but you know the world has to move on, and you're seeing it in a lot of states right now. Is people are chomping at the bit for anything. Um, Michigan, they were out protesting today, like, let us the fuck out. Which, I mean, it's not all that smart, but they did it. They did it. And Vegas is getting crazy. The mayor of Las Vegas demanded to the governor today to lift the order. So
And it's a wee bit of a strange thing here. When I look at, let's say, for example, Michigan, what's going on? Yeah, people are chomping at the bit because they want some semblance of normalcy back.
yeah,
Which we know.
I
Well,
personally
anybody in
don't
their
think it's
right,
ever
I will
going to
say
happen.
anybody in their right mind knows an semblance of normalcy is a long distance off at this point. And that's
If
just
ever,
what it is.
if ever, really.
However, yeah, and I'd say that loosely.
Right.
But however, something like this, a simple sporting event of some sort, like that is a small number sport like this, where in theory you can have your commentators social distancing. In fact, who was it? Ariel Hawani in DC had this conversation this week on his show where they were planning on having DC on one side, Anik on one side, and
Rogan
Joe
on the
Rogan
other.
on a whole different sides of the octagon just so they could keep the social distancing.
Yeah, no more 3-man table anymore. Just, safety's sake. It's what we got to do.
Yep. And so they'd still be able to hear each other through headsets and all of that, but you remove that, hey, we're next to each other thing, which is fine. So these things can move forward. Obviously, with WWE already having a set outline of how to do this and
Mm-hmm.
follow the rules that they have in place, it's doable. This will give people some sense of normalcy back because it's a sport. The U.S. thrives on sports, whether it's baseball, football, hockey, soccer, MMA. It doesn't matter. The UFC is big, or the hell, U.S. is big into sports as it were,
Yep.
and so this brings back some semblance of normalcy. It's not a lot, but it's something. And maybe this will put some of those people. It'll push them back at bay a little bit to go, okay, at least we have something to watch. Because guess what? I flipped on CBS this last weekend because what normally around this time of year is coming up is the Masters tournament. What were they showing? 2019 Masters. I don't give a fuck. I already know Tiger Woods won. I seen what happened. I seen the blown shots.
Yep.
3 people putting it in the water on 15 that blew their lead and allowed Tiger to come back and win. It's cool to rewatch those things, but I want to rewatch those on ESPN Classic.
Right.
I don't want to watch them on CBS Current.
Right, where the current one normally would be. I agree. I
But,
agree.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, that's going to give some people who didn't get a chance to watch it some sort of thing, but we all know the outcome, so why the fuck am I watching it again? The only time I rewatch stuff like that is if I'm drunk.
Yeah, I mean, we are the Kingdom of Rome. Give us our fucking Coliseum.
Right.
Right?
Basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my whole point is I think that will help ease people out of that whole I'm feeling cooped up thing because it gives them some sort of thing to look forward to. Albeit only a couple hours on a Saturday, guess what?
Well, and that's actually part of the thing, though, is that with wrestling setting the precedent here, showing that, somewhat, and I'm using the term loosely, somewhat larger performances can still be put on safely, using social distancing, everyone keeping their safe, doing proper.
And still being very entertaining.
Yeah, exactly,
and
entertain at the same time. And then you take on the other side of the planet, over in Taiwan, they're playing baseball again. There's no crowds, but both teams are out there. Players get their options to wear masks if they want. Most of them are, for safety's sake. But again, baseball is another game where there's more than enough room between players on the great majority of the game, and that's setting a precedent for the USA. Now, MLB is talking about possibly starting as early as August, I believe they said August 1st, starting to play in Arizona where it's warmer and they've got a very low risk of Backstreet Boy contagion. And they've got the same situation laid out where they've got a couple of different stadiums so they can have multiple games going at the same time. That way fans have options, and then you've got a backlog being built while you're trying to catch up. And at the same time, you're setting a precedent to show where you've got your other areas that this can be happening. Now you can start getting games going, back where they normally would be just without the crowd. We've got more things for people to watch. Everybody can simmer the fuck down a little bit.
Well, they've got NBA. NBA has a 25-day plan in
Right.
place for whenever they're allowed to start going again. The NFL has worked out, as far as I'm aware, this is what I've heard. It would be a shortened schedule. It would be empty arenas, but NFL football
Still.
generally will start on time.
Right.
So they're working out ways to do things. I mean, this is all stuff that should have been done years ago, quite honestly.
Yeah, the contingency
But I
plan
mean,
should
look
have
at
been there. I agree.
look at the hype for the NFL draft. Like, this is the next big thing coming up. It's coming up Thursday.
Yep.
Like, people are chomping at the fucking bit just to watch people's names get called. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't even football.
Yeah, no,
This
this
is
is
just
this is
people's
rookie
names
bingo.
getting said.
Yeah, this is rookie bingo essentially.
Exactly. So like people are going crazy for the draft just because it's going to be something, and it's normal. It's not going to look the way that it normally does, but it's something normal
It's something, yeah.
for people to grab onto. And yeah, I mean, the UFC to me seems like it would be one of the easier ones to get back on its feet. It's two fucking people in an octagon. You got three people on each side. You got the coach, you got the cut man, and somebody for support.
Yeah.
Whoever that happens to be. You got three
Right.
people on each side. That's four people out at the same time. You got your ring announcers. They don't even have to be ringside. Like, they could be watching their monitor backstage and doing the
Right.
commentary.
Right.
You can do that. You can do that easy enough. Add like a 45-second delay on, and you'll be able to sit there and have the people watching on monitors in the back. It's no big deal. So you've got eight people in one room. You got three people in different rooms with their headphones on, talking to each other in a Zoom room. You've got everything going on. UFC to me seems like it would be one of the easier ones to get back up and running, just because it is an individual sport. So it's easy enough to test the people in their crew. You just have you have to sequester the fighters, which at this point, if you're doing it in Vegas at the Apex Center, like, I'm sure there's a casino that's more than willing to rent out.
I was gonna say
Rent out all the rooms and quarantine
the
entire
publicity
fucking
they
place,
would get from that
just
shit
for
alone.
anything.
Yeah.
Just
To
for
be the
anything.
place that
and the
stepped
UFC
up.
doesn't have to disclose anything. I mean, all the casinos are shut down.
Yeah.
You don't have to disclose a fucking thing of where these guys are at. You just bring them in a week early. You test them right when they get there. You seclude
NDA
them.
'em.
They have their workout areas.
Yeah.
They have the areas where they can go get food, but everything is all in an enclosed space. And you'd have to be talking to like the hotel staff, like, hey, during this 2 weeks that these fighters are here, you can't fucking leave.
I mean,
Just so you're aware.
essentially, we're setting up Ultimate Fighter schedule.
Yeah.
In Ultimate
Yeah,
Fighter
sure.
House, you don't get your fucking cell phone. You don't get your fucking newspaper every day. You don't get the fucking internet. Like, you're fucking cut off for those couple weeks while shit's happening. They've done it 29 seasons in a row now. It's clearly a doable thing.
Yep, exactly. And people, these big league fighters, if they want their paydays, which they want their paydays,
Yep.
especially not the big guys, the little guys, they want their paydays that they were
Fuck yeah.
promised. Like, there's going to be some extra motivation going on. And one of these days, Sin is going to understand
She'll
MMA.
figure it out. We'll get there. Well, and that's
It's
actually
going to be amazing.
that's actually a great point to make here, because that brings me to the next point that I wanted to make, in that the president of Cage Warriors, one of the AAA league, if you will, the minors of combat sports, where both UFC, Bellator, and BKFC have actually drawn from now. Basically, where they call up their rookies to the pros from. The president of that organization actually released a statement just Tuesday that said this year in particular, despite all of the pro organizations, the MLB, the NFL draft, like we were just talking about, are still doing their regular drafts like they were, The UFC doing its quote unquote draft like it normally does throughout the year likely actually isn't going to happen due to this current Backstreet Boys situation that we're dealing with. Weirdly opposed to most normal years, where at this point in time, once we're already or would already be a couple of major events and several other smaller, build up events into the year, we would be dealing with a regular roster that is missing on average 25 to 30% of the fighters due to just general injuries, be it from the fights, be it from the training camp leading up to fights. We would be down a normal yearly roster almost 30%, which is exactly why almost every year at this time the UFC starts scouting organizations like Cage Warriors, organizations like Aries, organizations like LFA, different places where Dana White and other matchmakers start to look for the new talent to help bring into the UFC to start fill in shows like Dana White's Contender Series, where they basically groom new guys to come in as a UFC fighter. Things that they do in the Apex. Cage Warriors is one of those organizations where they get a good majority of their talent from. And this year, due to the Backstreet Boys keeping essentially everyone home and everyone training, and the vast majority of fighters not having to deal with it being back, all right, we've got essentially a full UFC roster. So not only do we have a full UFC roster where we normally wouldn't, we have events that have been postponed and multiple fights from large to small that are scheduled to take place and haven't had a chance to yet. And according to Dana, are still going to happen at some point as soon as they're able to be made. So now we have a full roster of healthy fighters and a bunch of fights that are already made, and now everyone going stir crazy, a bunch of other prospective fights where everybody's chomping at the bit to take a fight. So you could throw out a dozen possibilities to a dozen fighters and make a dozen fights.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some super cards coming up once they get everything in place. Once Mortal Kombat Island is set up,
Absolutely.
where they can't tell them no anymore, where he doesn't have to listen to Bob Iger and Mickey Mouse.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's some potential for some massive cards where they're picking and choosing just the cream of the crop, just the cream of that crop.
Yep.
Of those fights, and putting together these massive cards to get people back spending some money on some fights.
Right. They still got to get them incomes coming somehow, because fighters don't pay themselves, and money don't make itself if you're not putting on fights, if your business is putting on fights.
I mean, the UFC itself, well, I mean, you saw it with the WWE this week. I mean, the UFC itself is, in the long run, going to be fine. They've got plenty of money. They've got plenty of supporters. All their fighters are outside contractors.
Right.
And so you're not paying the outside contractors until they come in and do their due diligence.
Yeah.
So the UFC is still sitting on a mountain of gold at this point. They don't have all that much to worry about. Not yet.
Right.
Like WWE this week cut, I want to say it's like 25 wrestlers.
Yeah, it was 25. I saw it in the news.
Yeah, they cut a lot of people. Because they are not sitting on a mountain of gold. They do still have plenty of money. They lost quite a bit thanks to the XFL folding again, through no fault of its own, because it was actually doing pretty darn well as far as I was aware. But you take away half the games and the playoff, and you see what happens. And so it can go on. This can go on for a little while before Dana White just loses his stuff and he is sitting on a throne of skulls on Mortal Kombat Island.
Right.
And delivering the
yay or nay. Well, and ironically enough, you actually made part of the point here that brought me to the next thing that I wanted to talk about here. Just yesterday, we got a little piece released from an upcoming episode of Steve-O's Wild Ride podcast, of all fucking places to get fucking MMA journalists. I fucking love Steve-O, and I'm so fucking happy that this is where this little gem came from. But Steve-O and Ronda Rousey actually just sat down not long ago and did a couple of episodes where they have released part of it on the Rousey Gaming channel. They have released part of it in snippets on Steve-O's Instagram. They have a large chunk of it that's getting ready to get released as a Steve-O's Wild Ride podcast. And part of the gem that we got released from that was Ronda Rousey talking to Steve-O about the difference in her transition going from the Olympian to the UFC fighter to the WWE star to now just the quote-unquote at-home gamer, regular, non-athletic involved personnel anymore. And the difference to her out of all of them, where the biggest part came into play, was when she got to the WWE, because according to her, when you're in the UFC, it's very much like when you were still competing as an Olympian, whereas you get paid, like we were saying, per event. You're an independent contractor. You get your pay based on your individual performances. Whereas over on the WWE side of the house, they're salaried employees. They're still independent contractors, but they're salaried. So if you get injured and you can't compete for a couple of months, you still have your health insurance and you're still drawing a check. You're able to still support your family. Now, that's not saying Vince McMahon's not going to put you in every show for the next 36 years once you're healed, but you still get a check. You don't have to worry about time off literally ending your career if you can't provide. That's not a thing that we see on the UFC side of the house. But the interesting tidbit that she did make a point to mention is that through seeing it from both sides of the lens here, she also confirmed that because of the way that both the wrestlers in the WWE and the fighters in the UFC have essentially niched or grouped up organically on their own, it's going to be difficult for either side to unionize because of the way they've gotten accustomed to just existing as opposed to the company, versus like a boxer or versus like the Olympians, where there is an essential defensive union that looks out for everyone's best interest and gives more bargaining power. You don't get that as a UFC fighter or a WWE wrestler.
No.
You know, there is one thing that may come of this because of that right there, them not being salaried employees through the UFC. There's going to be a lot of these fighters that are hurting for money, especially on the low end.
Yes, a lot of them.
Not your top ranked guys, not your champs. They're not going to be hurting. But I'm talking about your middle of the road to lower guys. Let's say for the non-hype train variety fighters, like as much as I hate to say this, old Thug Nasty himself. He's kind of in this weird middle of the road spot. He's got a little train getting behind him, but he's not going to make a lot of money right
I would
now.
say
However,
probably fighters with less than 5 UFC fights on their belt so far.
yeah, let's go that route. That works.
Just as a general statement. That way we're not calling anybody individually out. Just to differentiate the newer guys,
And
5
I'm
or
not
less
calling
fights on your card.
individually out just to
yeah.
call them out here.
Just for bracket's sake.
Where I'm going with this is those guys that are on that lower end, they will be chomping at the bit. And what I think is going to end up happening because of that and the lack of income from this, we're going to get better fights because of it. Because guess what? They're going to want that knockout of the night. They're going to want that performance of the night, fight of the night, submission of the night.
You want that recognition, yeah.
They're going to want the recognition. So I think we're going to see better fights out of those guys. And to be honest, I think it's going to shoot some of them up where they should be, because we've seen a couple that are in that low spot where you're going, why are they still down there? They should be up here.
Right.
The other converse side of that, or whatever the fuck you want to call it here, the other side of that, you're going to see some of these bigger name fighters where they're like, yeah, it's not so bad. And they're still going to be the same fucking fighters they were. Whereas I think some of these other guys coming in and out for that, because they're on that low level and have been hurting, they're going to put a licking on some of these boys that aren't ready for it because they've been sleeping in these silk pajamas.
Absolutely.
And not hurting.
Well, and if you look, not to call anyone specifically out, I'm not going to mention any specific names just because I don't want to be that guy right now. I'll save that because there's plenty of that to come in the next couple of weeks when we actually get names to yell at. But there are several people right now in the fight world. If you look at their social media, they are very, very much staying sharp as a tack right now. They're not going out of their way. They're not going crazy, but they are not sitting on the fucking couch. They are not playing Xbox with me during the afternoon. These people are out there. They are putting their fucking miles in. They are getting their fucking sweat in. They are staying sharp. They are staying laser focused. So whenever we get things open back up, some of these people you can see have been just doing interviews in their PJs, hanging out in Zoom with Ariel Hawani, not doing shit during the day. And some of these folks are staying yoked the fuck up and training hard. And when it comes time to let the fucking dogs eat, I think we're going to see a lot of people who are just going to go fucking hard in the paint. And we're going to see some big fucking fights come loose.
I just think it's going to be an increased performance. Like, I really think because these guys have been one chomping at the bit, and a lot of them short on cash because of it.
Yep.
I really think you're going to see some increased production out of these fighters. Where everybody who was always booing about boring fights, this boring fight that, I don't think we're going to see many of those for a while. Once this all gets rolling again, but once it gets into full swing again, like a normal UFC,
right?
And for those of you just listening on SoundCloud, there was air quotes there, but that's when I think that'll fall off again once it becomes a regular thing again.
We get back to a routine.
I figure probably the first 10, 12, maybe 14 events, we're going to see that increased yearning. Because, and I say 10, 12, 14 because the roster for the UFC is pretty fucking deep. There's a lot of fights to be made out there.
Thick right now, yeah.
So, and with everybody who's had time to heal up from surgeries and everything else that they've had done, there's an opportune time for them to come out fucking swinging for the fences. Not to mention, it's going to bring back some people who may or may not have been out for other than honorable reasons.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, speaking of which, I was on a Russian server the other day for about 15 hours, doing a little COD. I was running with a Khabib Booty MMA official. I have suspicions that man is not staying all that sharp over in Russia. I have my suspicions that he may have gone over there just for the Call of Duty servers.
That hookup, yeah, that straight line to the house.
I do have my suspicions that Khabib Booty, MMA official, is spending his hours right now.
I heard Vlad gave him a T1 right to the house. So
when you hold the title hostage in a country with its borders closed, I mean, you're going to get some preferential treatment.
Yep, absolutely.
So Khabib Booty, MMA official, here's to you. Best of luck on the server, man. It was good. It was good running with you.
See you in September.
Right. Well, and that actually brings us to nicely into the next point that I wanted to talk about here. Some of these fighters, while they're staying home, like we talked about, are literally vegging out and playing Call of Duty with us all day long. But some of these guys, in their downtime, have started to do what some of the legends, like the one we're going to talk about here, have done. Talking specifically now about Hoist Gracie himself, has started to do full seminars online. The nice thing about all of these fighters having a whole lot of free time is that some of them have taken the opportunity to present their services to the world via the interweb. And it's giving us a beautiful library of information. We have got Hoist Gracie amongst many others putting on some free, some not free, understandably, but just the wealth of online knowledge we are gaining in the MMA world thanks to this Backstreet Boys situation is fucking ridiculous right now. And if nothing else, I think that is a great silver lining for the situation that we're currently pacing ourselves through.
Yeah, there are several BJJ gyms here around Spokane that are doing free classes.
Nice.
For people.
Nice.
So, I mean, I'm a little worried one day I'm going to come home and Jax is going to be all geared up and ready to go. And I'm like, whoa, it's been years since I rolled with anybody. What's this about?
Right. Too late. Time to go.
Like, it's your turn to cook dinner. I thought you were cooking dinner tonight. Are you sure you want to test this for SO3?
Right.
Next thing, the hidden camera, firing triangle from Jax.
Right.
Like I walk in with my bicycle over my shoulder. Next thing I know, she's got me Kimura'd over over the fucking bicycle frame, like, ah!
Walking you to the kitchen.
Yeah.
Oh, good times.
What were you making for dinner tonight?
Right? What was that on the menu again?
Hamburgers! I'm a vegetarian, fresh 03.
Right?
Ah! You can sleep on your bed stinking a burger all you want. You're making me a fucking arugula salad. It's rocket time, motherfucker.
There you go. No. What I will say is that this May 9th TBD event, they have given us kind of an amalgamation here. This is part of why I I have very mixed feelings about this May 9th TBD situation here. I both understand what they're doing and am excited as a fan, and at the other side of that, am very pissed off at how they're doing this as a fan, because what's happening is instead of keeping the event that was already scheduled to go in place and then bringing the rest of these fights in intermediately that are getting postponed, they are quite literally just play-doing all of the bigger fights from all these events that have been postponed and mashing them all together. What they have given us as of right now for this May 9th, which has kind of swept some from 249 and brought others, and then just weirdness. And bear in mind, this is also updated with I believe it's now 17 fighters who can't get out of where they are due to travel restrictions. So the updated card as of today is they're still going to do Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje, even though Tony Ferguson has been prodding Gaethje all week on social media to find out if he's actually going to weigh in, because Tony Ferguson says he's still going to make weight at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Just to prove a fucking point. So Tony's been prodding Justin all week to see if he's actually going to make weight Friday. We'll find out, because regardless, Dana says we are still going to get Tony versus Justin on May 9th. As well, they're going to give us the Amanda Nunes versus Felicia Spencer title fight to go with that. We've talked a lot about how interesting and weird that fight's going to be, but hey, I'm down for it. I don't think it's ideally right for this particular card, but I like the fight. I'm ready to see it. If they're ready to go, let's fucking let them go.
Nunez is ready.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If Felicia's ready to jump in and take this now, let's fucking do it. I'm down for that fight, so.
Okay.
It's weird, but let's fucking go.
Felicia also seems like one who's like,
she's
I'm
game
not
as
worried about
fuck,
her.
man. Yeah, she's game as fuck,
not worried
man.
about
I
it.
really like her. She's got a lot of chance here, I think.
I don't know how much of a chance she's got, but it'll be an entertaining fight for sure.
Right. But
because Nunez is still just a fucking,
she's
just a tree shredder.
She's a beast.
It's ridiculous.
And she realizes when something doesn't work, switch to something else, because we saw that in her last fight.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But
one thing isn't working, fine.
See, that's where this card starts to take a bit of a odd left turn here, though. See, they haven't announced any headline co-main people's main event order, just the fights here. So we know we've got Tony versus Justin. That's going to be most likely main event, co-main event, depending. We've got Amanda versus Felicia. That's another belt. Got to be co-main, main. But then we've got, on top of that, on the May 9th card, Francis versus Jairzinho. So we're getting the Ngannou versus Rosenstruck battle instead of 249 like it was originally getting bumped up to. Now they're putting it on this May 9th card as well. That kind of has to be main event, co-main event, people's main event, one of those three. But then on top of that, to make it even fucking weirder, we're also getting Henry Cejudo versus Dominic Cruz for the bantamweight belt. So there's a third belt, which you figure has got to be main event, co-main event, people's main event. But then you've got Francis. And then, wait, it's not weird enough yet. To mix it up even fucking crazier, they're going to round that card off with Cowboy versus Anthony Pettis.
Yes, please.
Ew. Yep.
Yes, please. I will take that.
How do you stack that lineup? Three belts and two very important non-title fights.
Well, and
The
there's a
UFC,
couple more on there too that makes this even more difficult that I saw that
Yeah.
are something too.
UFC Supercard 1.
Yeah. Like we're not
Like this
waiting
is,
we're not waiting for International Fight Week to go crazy this year.
I was gonna say that that's generally when you see something like this and you're going, oh, okay, it's normal because it's an international fight week. However,
We're getting
the
May.
get your time ready. The caveat to that is that this isn't normal circumstances
Yeah.
that would normally go into an international fight week because as much as I hate to say this, we might not get international fight week this week. In fact, I'm probably going to lay 10-1 odds it's not going to be that this year.
Well,
They banned everything in
the,
California for what was it, the rest of the year?
yes. But
And
the
New York
caveat to that, the caveat to
is you can
that
get
though,
put onto the
we might have International Fight Week internationally on a fucking Mortal Kombat island.
I'm so I like
International
I
Fight
want to
Week
see them
might be
like
international waters on fucking Mortal Kombat Island.
can they come through the mist on Viking boats?
I
Like that's
want,
how you arrive for your fight?
yeah, and then like torches on the beach that you have to walk
Yes.
out from the shadows
And
through.
the
Like,
fights are outside because it's in a
yes,
beautiful locale where it's like
yes.
70 degrees year
Don't have to
round.
worry about no fucking boys.
Yeah.
I'm telling
And
you,
Dana White is sitting on a skull of thrones.
right?
The reason why I say the no international fight week, we might get that kind of card in July, but international fight week's not about the card itself. It's about the fans. That's what
Mhm.
international fight week was built on. It was
Yeah,
built on the fans showing up, getting to meet fighters, do all these different press conferences for upcoming fights and things like that. It's not going to be that. We might
No.
get a spectacular card, but I don't think we're going to see that same influence on International Fight Week. So that's why I say in this weird situation, this is kind of that International Fight Week type card that they're got built
putting
up right
through.
now
Yeah,
because of the certain situation that's currently at hand with reunion tours. But it's I just don't see I don't see the need for it right now. The reason for that being there's still a lot of year left. They've got to find places to fill in the rest of these cards because I don't want one fucking just royally awesome card.
right. And then the rest be shit for the rest of the
And
year.
Now,
with everything getting rolled though, I mean, with everything getting rolled and pushed, like there's all these fights that were supposed to be the main event, the co-main event, the people's main event. There's all these fights that were supposed to happen. And Dana White said they're happening. And they're just getting rolled into the next card, into the next card, and the next card. And that's why I think that we might see some of these UFC super cards popping up where we've got 3 title fights. We've got 2 fights that mean a hell of a lot to the fucking division. You know, you could see a lot of these cards happen throughout as Dana's, you know, doing his best to fulfill these promises. Obviously, there's going to be some fluff and some other things that make its way in because there's a lot of fights that the people are under contract for that were fluffy from the fucking start anyway.
Yep.
I think the thing I'm most worried about with this is that they blow their load in the first 6 fights that they get off. They blow all of the huge fucking things out of the water because they're so far behind. Then we get stuck with mediocre at best the rest of the year. And let's say, and I'm stringing possibilities here, possible that all of this shit keeps rolling through the next year and a half, because it's a very strong possibility that
It is.
could happen
It
based on
absolutely
what
is.
we see that's going on currently.
Yep.
We're gonna see reunion tour doing this number. For those of you listening,
Sales dip and rise.
Who's doing the
yeah,
wave?
we're riding the waves here.
Yep.
So I have a feeling what they'll do is once they've got things under control, again, air quotes here for you just listening and not watching, that they may have screwed themselves out of this year because they are going to try to push it through. And I get it. And the biggest part I get of this, you have to throw a super card first. And the reason for this is you have a bunch of people that are cooped up at home. You have a bunch of people who haven't seen any sporting event in a long time. You have a bunch of people that are wondering, why the fuck am I going to spend $65, $70 on this to sit at home and watch this when all I want is a sport?
Right.
This better be worth my $65, $70. That could be the reason why they're doing this first one way big, to get people back into that mindset of, okay, you know what? This is perfectly all right.
Right. When it's worth
I
it, it's
just don't
worth
want
it.
to
I
see
can
them.
spend money on a card that's got 3 belts.
Right.
Yeah, so you get 3 title fights, and then you get somebody's going into orbit.
Right.
You get 2 guys that are willing to go out there and die on the shield. There's a lot of possibility there, and I think that's probably, I think part of that is a marketing scheme for them.
Right. Well, and
But on the other side of that, I'm also worried that they're going to continue to do that for the next couple of cards until they blow their load, and we end up with Fluffer City.
to that
I mean,
point,
a lot,
go ahead.
I was going to say the weekly events that we're used to, just quite frankly, haven't been able to take place, and so they've got all these fights that they have promised people that, yeah, we're going to pay you, you're going to do this fight. You know, you've got this built up, and you've got a limited window. Let's say that they're able to put on one of the, let's say Mortal Kombat Island takes so long to get to it. You can do this once every 2 weeks. You can do this once a month.
Right.
You know, then these kind of super cards make sense, and then you kind of titrate things down as you're able to, you know, put more and more events on. It gets easier and easier to get to Mortal Kombat Island. So you're able to, you know, 6 months down the road, you're doing the traditional two belt on a card for a big time fight, and then you're able to do your weekly events where you've got your up and comers trying to make their name and maybe possibly move up to one of the bigger events.
And see,
Eventually that'll happen. Obviously, the infrastructure on Mortal Kombat Island is not in place yet.
Still being built, allegedly. I'm using air quotes for those listening.
Yeah, everything's still being built over there. So, you know, it makes sense to put on these super cards. You know, if you're going to fish some money out of people, you give them the best that you can, and especially these days with, you know, nobody's really, you know, unless you're out there essentially working. A lot of folks, quite frankly, don't have the money for these. You know,
Right.
sometimes maybe you throw a free card out there. You know,
I
and
agree.
that free card could be some of the lesser people. You know, that, you know, put it online on danacombat.com or whatever website is going to be
Right.
the official website for the Mortal Kombat Island. You know, or throw it up on a free streaming service like YouTube or, God forbid, Facebook. Fuck that. Anyway,
well,
um,
to circle back around to what I was saying about that, like you said, we were getting weekly fights. A lot of those weeklies that we were getting, those had a lot of those small fluffer things in there because
fights.
you have to give the guys that are coming in a platform.
Right.
Yeah.
But you usually have 2, sometimes 3 fights that were really worth watching on those, that were going to make some sort of difference, or at least were interesting to the fans.
Yeah.
If we blow our load, all we're left is with those guys who you still have to give a platform to. So it makes it a little rough. And then don't get me wrong, you still have fighters that can do the short turnarounds, the cowboy surround
Right.
races and things of that nature, who are the company men that have been doing that. But it's not going to be it'll end up, I just don't want it to be a permanent thing where they fucked it for a whole year or for 6 months, let's say.
Right.
Let's say they do this and 3 more fight cards that are fucking just phenomenal, just these super cards that we're talking here. Even if it happens once a month, at that point you're into July.
Right.
You have 5 months left of the year. Say these guys are all out for 5 months. You might get one more decent super card fight if they blow that shit out of the water in the first 4 fights.
Well, I think part of it is the super fan in me being eternally optimist, looking forward through the fucking reunion tour. But part of it I can legitimately rationalize. The way that I think in terms of possibly having to deal with a super fight burnout situation like this is essentially right now we've been out about 4 weeks. It's looking to be, if everything goes through and we get back to some semblance of normalcy around May 9th, we'll have about a 6-week gap where we didn't have anything that we should have. Before the reunion tour really kicked off, the last announcement that we had got from Dana and Sean Shelby and Mick Maynard was that they had booked prospectively enough fights to fill the roster card out to the third quarter but hadn't booked the final quarter of the year out. If they do some finagling and we get a couple of super fights to fill in the meanwhile, they've already got cards lined out. So we really just have to work in around what was already there so that we have a structure to work with, and then add around the events that we already had planned with the fights that are getting picked up from events that had been postponed. So I think that gives us room to put on a couple of super fights and still not really burn out, because they already had some of those lined out to be main events down the road. So as long, I'm not saying, obviously we've seen Dana fuck it up when he had a fucking nice lob tossed right in fucking front of him. So I'm not saying it's a set in stone thing by any fucking means. I'm saying prospectively, what I'm hoping is that if they actually did have, even give them, you know, the short end of the fucking stick, say they only had midsummer planned out, that would actually, in this one situation, if they were lying and trying to make it sound like they had more planned out than they did, this is one of the few times that would actually be beneficial for them, because by bragging that they had more than they did, they would actually give themselves more time to work these super cards in without stepping over their own dick. I don't know. We'll see prospectively how it plays out, but
there's going to be a lot of interesting possibilities that can go on from here on out, and
right.
I'm saying if this next event goes forward.
Right.
I say if because God knows there's some fucking bastard out there that is just going to be.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
And I say some bastard as some governor or some congressman that, I don't like this.
They hate fun.
Yeah. Killjoy, for lack of better terms.
Right. Yeah, no, there's always going to be one, but we'll have to keep an eye out and see how it goes. Interesting, kind of, not necessarily UFC news, but kind of possibly maybe potential UFC news, I guess would be appropriate here. With the weirdness that has become the rise of the, air quotes for those listening, celebrity super fights that we've started to see, the Logan Paul KSIs, the Artem Lobov versus Paulie Malignaggi's, we've seen different platforms give different avenues to different celebrities who just want to beat the shit out of each other. Some per pay-per-view, some just on DAZN, because apparently DAZN does weird fucking fights like that. But the next one that has some odd momentum behind it, I guess would be the only accurate way to say it, is coming from a baseball player and a NASCAR driver. And it's a strange tie between the two. You might not normally make that sort of a lasso to tie that all together with the UFC. But then you hear the whole story. And if you know about the Backstreet Boys situation, it's obviously got every major sport doing things a little bit different, if they are even able to keep doing things. Well, NASCAR is one of those things that they're still able to keep doing, because even though they're not able to get in their car and go around the tracks, there are very, very advanced NASCAR simulators, and they are using one and having a virtual season to finish things out. And it has gone as gloriously horrible as you would imagine. And that's where it ties into this little story. A gentleman by the name of Kyle Larson, during one of his rage quit moments, flipping his shit because he couldn't fucking handle it, let loose with one of those phrases that is never to utter your words, least of all in anger. He dropped an N-bomb live during a NASCAR virtual race. It subsequently cost him his sponsors and then cost him his NASCAR career. But wait, there's more, because now the pitcher for the New York Mets, a very proud African-American gentleman, has decreed that he would like the opportunity to take a pay-per-view event and put on a UFC-style event against this individual to help teach him the cultural appropriation lesson that he so did not clearly learn growing up. Strange times, folks. Strange fucking times indeed.
I'm not gonna lie, I'll tune in to watch that.
I will as well. I don't normally try to advocate for general civilian violence like that, but I think given the story that led to this circumstance, I think this would be one of those weird occasions where you could make sure that the two gentlemen have some sort of basic knowledge, make sure they've got all the proper protective gear, put them in a fucking cage, ring the fucking bell, and put the camera on them.
I think the only people who are gonna have a problem with that is gonna be the New York Mets.
I mean, like I said, this obviously we are not talking about ideal stories. Yeah, but strange times lead to strange stories, folks, and that's why I say I don't just do this to tell you guys about the events coming up. I try and bring you some of the more interesting stories that might not get as much coverage as I feel they might deserve, and weird things like this, they make me giggle a little bit. So I like to make sure that the folks know stuff like this.
I mean, that just would be a good time watching a racist dude get beat down.
I mean, if Logan Paul and KSI
he's probably
can make
looking for
$1 million,
he's probably looking for a payday, right?
Yeah, I'm saying if Logan Paul and KSI can make $1 million, a dude who fucked up and a dude who wants to show him how bad he wants to fuck up, like, I think we could make something.
Like, I'll fight Logan Paul for $5.
See, like, this is how it goes. Now we're talking about Logan Paul. Like, make the Larson fight happen.
Kyle Larson.
Man,
I wish you the best.
Yeah.
The only problem I have with that fight is Kyle Larson would get a payday out of the deal.
That's true. I think he would have to donate his fee to charity regardless of the thing. Like, he would have to donate his fucking full prize money to, like, the NAACP or something.
That's what I was going to say, the NAACP.
Yeah, or United Negro College Fund or something good to just cement home the whole unity of the event. I think it would be okay, but, you know. But to round things out here, just a couple more points I do want to talk about. Like I mentioned, with times being what they are and we're not having events, we've gotten a lot more of fighters taking advantage of this free time to do Zoom lounged back, you know, relaxed, laying down, usually on a sofa or a futon somewhere, and doing an interview with any one of a number of different sports journalists. This week, one of the, I'm not going to say good, more noteworthy, there we go, more noteworthy, that's the word I was looking for, more noteworthy interviews we saw done socially distanced as we do this show as well, but definitely much more relaxed on a much lower quality scale this time. Ariel Hawani's show had a moment where we got to talk with Uriah Faber and Andre Philly about how in some of their downtime as fighters, they've been taking part in terrible action movies as well. The movie they are in looks absolutely terrible. They showed a couple clips from it. I encourage everyone to watch because I have a feeling we're going to be laughing at this a lot more once it's on a full promotional release as well.
Well, I mean, we know that if I watch this movie at all, Uriah Faber dies in it. So
He kind of has to, really. But apparently they chose Andre Philly for his tattoos, not his ability. Which kind of makes sense.
We've seen that before in several movies. I believe Paul Blart Mall Cop was a perfect example of where you...
As a guy with a lot of bad tattoos, I understand that stereotype very well. But the last one that I do want to talk about here before I let you folks wander back into the free is the fact that in these trying times, before Vince McMahon weaseled his way into his temperate stature that he is in right now, there was one man who stood alone against the Backstreet Boys and let his nuts swing unabashed and unafraid of any fucking reunion, of any naysayers, of any downlookers, of any who would oppose or look down upon. There was one man, one heel of society, the heel, if you will, who stood up for us as fans to make sure that we had something in these trying times. And he's doing that again. He's standing up and he's letting his patriotic nuts hang again in these trying times. That man, ladies and gentlemen, is Uncle Chael Sonnen. And Submission Underground 13 not only is still going forward April 26th, they announced today they're adding more fights. They're making it a bigger card because they were the first to figure out how to safely socially distance, self-quarantine, isolate, stay safe, and still put on an event. So they're doing it again. Uncle Chael is the hero we deserve. Maybe not the one we need, but he's definitely the one that we deserve. And I, for one, am fucking glad for it.
I figure he's got like guest houses on his farm
He has
somewhere
to have
somewhere over by
something.
Portland. Like
yeah.
that's like I haven't figured out how he's doing this, but
I
Uncle
don't.
Chael, you're the man, and thank you.
He's a fucking national treasure right now. He
He
gives
is.
no shits. I love it.
You know, the I love this. The sad part of this for me, though, not enough people know about it.
I agree. And that's exactly why I
It's-
take time to make a point to mention it in things like this.
What I'm wondering is why isn't there a news fucking feed on ESPN right now about Submission Underground?
Especially
Because guess
considering
what?
it's on Fight Pass.
Yep. I'm just saying they should be covering the shit out of this right now, doing social distancing interviews with the guys that are going to compete in it, with Chael himself, because he's going to be the only announcer again.
Yep. Which and it works so beautifully. If you've ever heard Chael commentate, it's one of the things that he was just born to fucking do. He's so fucking great at it. And doing it at his own event just gives it a certain little je ne sais quoi that just puts it over the fucking top for me. I love it.
Yep.
But that is all we've got for this week on my plate. If either of you gentlemen have anything else, I would gladly yield the floor.
I've been doing mock drafts like crazy at work.
Nice.
So I've been seeing that one of the big four tackles has been slipping to my Niners at the 13th pick. If the 49ers are in any way the team that I imagine them to be, they will take one of those big four tackles if one of them slips. That is all I have to say. You're welcome, 49ers. You're fucking welcome.
I'll allow it. Well, then, on that note, folks, before we get out of here, I would take a moment and thank you all for tuning in. If you enjoyed what we did this evening, give us a thumbs up. If we made you chuckle, pointed some things out you didn't know, maybe subscribe. We do this pretty much every fucking week. If we brought some things to your attention that you didn't know before, if we really just gave you an aha moment, if the light bulb went off while you were watching my show, please share an episode. We're trying to grow this damn thing. But on the other side of that coin, if we're just a couple of dumbasses sitting in front of webcams, talking out our ass, not knowing what the fuck we're actually saying, go ahead and give us a thumbs down. We deserve it. We earned it. We won't dispute it. But before we get out of here, I do want to take a moment and thank these fine gentlemen for being along on this shit-talking shenanigan journey with me. So, if at some point during this next week, before we get back to the next I'm No Joe, folks need a little more Fresh 03 in their life, what would be the best way for them to find you, sir?
I'm not sure how you could get more Fresh 03 in your life. It seems like I'm on every night every night, out and about. The next time I'll be live is tomorrow, my channel. I'm about to sneeze. Pardon me.
So tight.
Yeah, I'll be live on my channel tomorrow. YouTube.com/Fresho3. We'll probably be doing some mixing or getting up to no good or something. Friday nights, or we just kind of do whatever the hell we want. So we'll figure something out between now and then and rock it on. And then Saturday, I believe we're doing Final Fantasy mixes
Nice.
on my channel. YouTube.com/Fresho3.
Nice.
So we'll see all of you later. Be beautiful to each other. Educate, advocate, be good for this community. We'll see you on that next one.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. Much appreciated. And now, at this point, I don't know how it could be, but at this point, if somebody just doesn't understand why the Packers and the Kenosha Killer himself are just so intertwined in Wisconsin's history, how could someone get themselves an education from you, Galti?
Well, once this is all over, they can probably find me at the pub. But prior to that, every Wednesday night right here on YouTube, 9:30 Central Time, Galti Vapes. Have a little fun, bunch of shenaniganry. And there was one thing I forgot to mention during that last little portion of news here. And this is just a rumor at this point, but something I've heard through the grapevine. There's a one Mr. The Outlaw, Dan Hardy, is batting the idea around of a comeback. And I thought that was noteworthy for you guys to just meddle in for a couple of days. Think about that, because to be honest, he was a fantastic fighter, and he was always exciting to watch. Granted, he's a little long in the tooth now at 37, and he's been out of the game for quite a few years. But
well, to that point, though, he did say that he doesn't want to interrupt anyone's path to gold, and he knows that he's not going for a title run, so he would specifically like to fight someone in the caliber of an Anthony Pettis or a Donald Cerrone, someone who's not going to get their career interrupted by him fighting them either. So it could be interesting.
It could be interesting because there's some long in the tooth guys that are out there that are at his level, or, well, I say at his level. I don't know what his level is anymore because he's been so long out and how hard he's training. But either way, just something for you guys to think about, ponder, let it marinate upstairs, because at this point it's just a rumor. But
we'll see.
Definitely something to look into. But no, I'll see you guys Wednesday and every Thursday here.
Hell yeah! Thank you very much for your time, sir. That being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up here. I forgot to do it in the beginning, but I am going to do it before we get out of here. If you do enjoy the things that we do here on the I'm No Joe podcast, you can find us on basically all social media platforms. Facebook, I'm No Joe. Instagram, I'm No Joe. YouTube, obviously, I'm No Joe. We also do some video game streaming once in a while on Mixer / you guessed it, I'm No Joe. And if, folks, I understand how it can happen, these Instagram influencer level faces are just too distracting for you. We also produce the I'm No Joe podcast in all audio form, distraction free, available on your podcast consuming platform of choice, or anchor.fm / I'm No Joe to take you there. But that being said, that's all we've got for this evening. I would thank you very much for tuning into this particular episode of the I'm No Joe podcast. We will be back one way or another next week. Backstreet Boys be damned. We will be here for you, your home of all things punchy kicky. So remember, don't let ignorance stop you. You can root for anything, unless you haven't figured out how Dana White got Kombat Island yet. In that case, the only thing I can say is,
everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. the good times that made us laugh.